Hey guys, welcome to another budgeting on a low income. But this week we'll be discussing budgeting on a low income when you are in debt. Hey guys, welcome to Budget with a July Dreamer. My name is Miranda, and on this channel I share everything personal finance, specifically sharing tips on how to save, how to invest, as well as how to budget. If these topics interest you, then please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel so you can get more of this type of content. So as I mentioned, in today's video, I will be talking all about budgeting on a low income, especially for those who are in debt. This is a position I found myself in when I was at uni, before I started my graduate job, and even after when I started working on actively paying down my debt. So I have my laptop here on my lap because I'll be walking you through budgeting using one of my trackers to show you how I would budget and how I used to budget when I was on a low income and in debt. I have my trusted notebook here. I wrote some notes down so that I know the structure that I want to follow for this video. But I also found my old, when I say old, I mean like it's even ripping, it's literally falling apart. So this is the notebook that I was writing all my budgeting and debt into way back in 2007. I found this recently when I went to visit my mom, and oh my god, you guys, I'm looking at this. Look, I literally had, oh my god, it's so bright. I don't think you can see. Can you see this? No, I don't think. Oh yeah, from afar you can see it, but I wrote down a lot of that. I'm filming during the day, so it's so bright right now, but I wrote down all the debts that I had, all my accounts that I had, and all of that. Just so this is how I did it. I as much as I love my spreadsheets, and I'll obviously be walking you through one, I also do love writing things down. I think I do have about 3 notebooks that I write my financials in, and I love that. I just love being able to write things down, transfer some of that information into my trackers. So I try and keep my trackers clean, and then all my thoughts, what I'm thinking, all of that jazz I put in my notepads and my plans for the future. So before I start sharing my tracker and giving you an example of how you can budget on a low income, especially when you're in debt, I want to first talk about budgeting when you are in debt. Because when I was in debt, budgeting seemed like the last thing on my mind, which is very weird because you would think because I was in debt, I needed to make sure that my money was in check. But no, I just felt like budgeting would, one, restrict me and give me a headache. Don't know why I thought that, and maybe could have been my money mindset at that time. But I'm grateful that over the years I have learned the beautiful thing about budgeting. It really keeps you in control of your money. But when you're in debt, it doesn't feel like it, but in actuality it does. It keeps you in control of your money. So in today's video, some of the tips, I think I wrote down 4 tips that I would like to share about budgeting when you are on a low income. So what I did, the first thing that I have on my list, what I did was when I became serious about paying down my debt, paying it off, I decided the first thing that I did was that I was going to write all my debt down. And I know, I can hear your mind, the cogs in your head going. But to be honest, as much as that scared me, as much as I didn't want to admit how much debt I was in, this was one of the first, I think one of my biggest steps that I ever took. So I looked at all the emails I was getting from companies chasing me to pay them back. I looked at all the letters that I received, all the text messages, and I wrote everything down, every single company. I wrote it all down. So I wrote the company name. So sometimes some of the debt that I had it for so long that company had actually sold my debt to a debt collection agency. So I needed to have this up-to-date information. So I had in my table, I had a column for the original company that I owed, a column for the new company that had bought my debt, if there had been any change, their contact details. I wrote down my contact information, like my reference numbers, all the details that I provided to them, how much I originally got. So if it was a credit card, how much was my limit at the time I fell into debt? So if it was £1,000, 750, 500, all of that, I wrote that down. Then I wrote how much I had, in debt at that time. I don't know if it would have been helpful for me to write down the interest that had accumulated, but to be honest, this was too detailed for the level of budgeting that I was at that time. So what I did, I just wrote down the amount that I owed at that time. I did write down the interest rate, but again, my money money management skills at that time went that further along. So having an interest rate for the debt at that time didn't make any difference to me. I just wanted to get rid of the debt. But I'll explain to you why it's important in a minute. So then I wrote down, what else did I write? I wrote down the months. So starting with the month that I started to get serious about paying down debt. That was what I did. That was the first thing. So found every single company I owed. And in my case, it turned out to be 11 companies. Wrote everything down, found all the information, and where I didn't have the information, I waited before I called the company, which I did in the end and got the information, but I didn't call them the first time when I was writing this list down. The second thing that I did was to budget. So now I say budget because at that time I wasn't calling it budgeting. At that time, I just looked at how much I got paid. Right? How much I got paid, and of how much I got paid, then I looked at how much I owed, and then when I removed all my essentials, so my rent, food money, transport, because I didn't drive at that time, so I didn't have a car, so transport, when I removed these essentials, because my rent included my utilities bill, so that was the good thing about that, so I didn't have a lot of expenditures at that time. So I removed that, things like my mobile, I removed that. Again, the broadband was part of my rent charge that I had, because I lived in shared accommodation. So that meant that I didn't have too many bills. I didn't have too many expenditures at that time. So I took out the chunk of that to my essentials, put them to one side. The second thing I did was went back to my tracker with all of my debt, and I thought about it. I thought about realistically, how much could I afford to pay every single one of the companies that I owed money to? So some of them I could afford £25, some of them £30. The maximum I think I could for most of them was £50. I did want to see if I could pay each and every single one of them £50, but I decided against it because you do want a little buffer in case any of your bills go up or what have you, and that means that if any of your bills go up and you've obviously paid all you don't have any money left, it doesn't put you again into debt. So I wanted to have a little bit of a buffer, like £50 as a buffer. So I wasn't looking at a huge buffer, just about £50. So I did that, looked at how much I could pay realistically, put in some numbers. That was my budgeting. That's as far as my budgeting went, and I wrote all of that down. And I was looking at this morning, and I really had to go back down memory lane and just be like, oh my god, I have come so far. Like my life back in 2007 and my life in 2021 are polar opposites, like proper polar opposites, but I'm grateful for the growth. So after I wrote down my budget of how much I could realistically pay, I contacted each and every single company. I explained to them my situation, and either they told me, oh, we sold your debt, and again, this is how I got the information, or they told me, well, we can accept this amount, not this amount. And I told them, you know what, I'm gonna have to put you on a back burner until I can pay off my other bills, because that's the only way I can afford to pay you guys. Most of the companies, when they heard that, they are more than happy to then come up with a repayment plan that will work for you, because there were some that were outright rude, and to me, I know this probably is not the mature way of doing it, but as soon as they became rude, I was already stressed. I would just hang up and call again another day. So I did that. I spoke to 99% of them, were very nice, and they came up with a repayment plan. The only thing that each and every single one of them requested of me was to complete what they called an expenditures tracker, so that they could see how much money was I making and how much money was going out. So they also wanted to know how many companies I owed. So having this tracker, this budget tracker, actually worked out in my favor. So I would send to all the companies that were requested, and they're like, oh, okay. And some of them even were like, oh, would you like to actually pay lower? So for some of them that I'd said 50, they're like, oh, why don't we just do 25? Because it looks like you're not even left with any money. And I was thankful to them for that. But some of them, when I look back at my list now, I realized the ones that wanted me to pay a little less were the ones with the highest interest. Now, if you've not heard of the Snowball or avalanche method of debt repayment, I will leave a link to my blog post in the description bar below. So essentially, the Snowball method asks you to start paying off debt, starting with the smallest and moving on to the largest. So if your smallest debt is, say, £100 or $100, whatever your currency, it tells you, okay, pay off that one first. So you pay it off. So if you're doing £25, then you would do 4 payments of that. Once you are done, that £25 that would have initially gone to the first debt, you move it to the second debt. So on all of your other debts, so for my case, I had 11. So the first one, which if it was £100, I'll be paying 25, and then the other debts that I had, I'll also be paying the minimum repayments that I agreed with the company. I would do that. I'll pay them back the minimum amounts that we had agreed, and then for the first one, I'll try as hard as I can to make sure I pay that off first. And then when I finish that one, I use the amount that I used to pay for the first one, and I move that to the second one, so that the second one, if I was paying £25 also for the second one as a minimum repayment, I would now have £50. So 25 from the first debt and 25 from the second. So that's how it starts to build up like a snowball. Gets larger and larger as you attack the next debt in line. That's the Snowball method. For the avalanche method actually asks you to pay off the debt with the highest interest. Now, most of the credit cards in the UK, some of them have got ridiculous interest rates. We're talking 19%, we're talking 29%. Payday loans, don't even get me started. They were like 110%. I don't even know how that is legal, but we had that. Okay, when you are in debt, you would even consider 200% interest rate on something. Like, trust me, I have been there. So the avalanche method asks you to pay off the one with the highest interest first, because then you will actually save money in the long run. It doesn't feel like it when you start off at the beginning, to be honest, because I did try that and I realized, no, Debt Snowball was for me because of the instant gratification, to be honest, because it boosted my mood. When I saw, oh, okay, with the avalanche, I got to pay one off quickly. That boosted my mood, and then I quickly started working on the second one. I paid that off. You can see the progress. You can see the amount of debt you have decreased. Whereas with the avalanche, because you're focusing on interest rates, you may not immediately see that the actual amount you owe is decreasing because you started off with the largest one. So if you are £100,000 in debt and you're only making a payment of like £100, because you're tackling the highest interest, you may not see the difference early on, but later on it will save you a lot of money in the long run, but it just does not feel like it at the beginning. So that is, for me, I decided to go with the Debt Snowball method, and because I'd come up with a repayment plan, I was able to obviously start attacking the first one vigorously, whilst the other ones I had the minimum payments that I could do. So first thing I did was write down what I owed. Second thing, I did a budget. Third thing, I contacted each company. Like I said, each company wanted an expenditures tracker, which essentially was the budget. And then the fourth thing that I did was keep up with the repayments that I had agreed with these companies, because the last thing you want to do is default on the repayments that you have agreed. Because, this is why I sat down with myself before I involved any companies, before any companies ideas that are running around in my head, I sat down with myself and I was like, realistically, how much could I afford? So how much could I afford of what I have left over once my essentials are taken care of? And then if I'm like, okay, for this of my 11 bills, I can afford to pay £50. I will be like, okay, £50 is good, but how about if I maybe try offering the company £35 or £40? So I have the £10 as a buffer. And that's what I did, because again, if something happens, if an emergency comes up in your life, that may throw you off balance and you may end up missing repayment on a repayment plan. And again, as much as they tell you, oh, you should contact us and let us know, it will affect your credit. You know, it really will affect your credit. So this is why you have to be realistic about how much you can actually afford to pay. And then when you know how much you can realistically afford to pay without, if something happened, without going into debt, then you have that and then you stick to it, because then as you start to pay back, you start to improve your credit in the long run as well. So those are my 4 tips that I followed when I was paying off debt and I was on a low income. So now we'll move over to the tracker, because I can see we're already about 15 minutes into this video. So I'll move on to the tracker and I'll just show you how you can budget when you are in debt, and also how you can save when you're in debt and on a low income. And the low income I'm working with today is 1,900. Okay, so this might be lower for you, this might be higher, but we will work with that. So I'll start the recording now and move over to my tracker. I'll shrink myself to the corner. So we're saying the salary that we're working with is 1,900, and I've only populated the actual amount column because of my tracker, because if I remove all the numbers, it becomes funny like that, and I don't want that. So this is why we're keeping the numbers here. So ignore these numbers for now. So all of my trackers, so you can buy this tracker that I'm showing on the screen now from my Etsy shop. I'll leave the link in the description bar below. All my trackers have an income section, fixed expense section, personal expenses, and then we also have debt for this type of tracker. Some of them have sinking funds instead of the debt, and some of them don't have any of those. And then it's got savings and then total expenditures, just so you can see in terms of percentage of your income what's going to what. So let's go back to the income. So we're saying your salary, because you have a job, you know, you're earning some income. We're working with 1,900, and let's say in this day and age it's very important to have a passive income, like your side hustles, because we have seen that just one salary, you know, just having money from your salary is no longer enough to catch up with not only inflation, but the cost of living, you know, has gone up and it continues to. So you need something on the side. So for the purpose of this budget, we're saying £200 is what you're budgeting you get from your side hustles. But what you will notice with this tracker is that I haven't actually included the 200, no, the carryover income. So the carryover income is last month you didn't spend all your money, there is some left. So here we're saying you have about £100 there. And then in life, for me, I have noticed that I get money coming from all over the place. Sometimes I don't even know. So this is why I always have this tab other, because I get money from everywhere really. So it could be somebody who owes me money, they return the money. Somebody who wants to bless me in a different way, they give me that money. All of that kind of stuff. So this is why I always have a tab for other. So for the purpose of this example, we have not added anything. So the total income we're working with, if we include the passive income and the carryover income, is 2,200. But for this budget planning, I have only put 1,900. So let's begin. First with the fixed expenses. So if you own your home, then obviously you have the mortgage, otherwise rent. So we are budgeting that you're paying something like £700. Now, this is dependent on the area and the house that you're living in. So in my area, £700 can get you a 1-bed apartment. Okay, in other areas up north, I know some places are cheaper. Down south, if you are, the closer you are to London, the more expensive stuff are. And I think in general, the closer you are to the city center, the more expensive, like big cities, I mean, and then the city centers to those big cities, the more expensive things are. So let's assume that you are living in a village town type of community, okay? And we're saying your rent is about £700. Council tax in the UK, we all pay council tax. If you don't, I would speak to your council about that, unless you are like exempt. I don't know how you can be exempt for council tax unless you are retired, I believe, but I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. So council tax, we're saying 130. Food, for food budget, I'm saying £200, purely because for me as a single person, I live off £20 a week. This is something that I have been actively working on for the last 4 or 5 months, to actively stick to £20 a week. I budget £200. So even though I budget that, I don't spend all of it, but there are times when you want to do a big food haul. So that means that obviously maybe the extra 100 you can go and stock up. Now, for me, this food, it's not including household items. You can keep that separate. So if we include household items, we may need to increase this budget. But right now, it's just for food. Then home or renter's insurance. So depending on which you are, if you own your home, then obviously you need to have insurance for that. I'm budgeting the highest that I pay. Right, I know some people pay less, some people pay more. So we're saying we're paying 115. If you actually pay less, this is good thing, right? Then you have a little bit more money staying in your account. With budgeting, the first tip I'll give you is always overestimate, never underestimate. I know it's also okay to budget exactly how much you're going to pay, especially when you know, but sometimes I love rounding off numbers. I love even numbers more than I love odd numbers, but I would still round off to the nearest pound, nearest dollar, whatever currency you have. Electricity, I'm going with £40. Again, this may differ depending on your provider, the area, and what have you. Gas, we're going 55. For my 3-bed house, I'm paying about £55. Water and sewer, £20. I pay about 24 for my water. So, but this could be more for depending on your area. Internet and broadband, you can find cheaper than £30. You have to do the research. Cable and streaming services. So for you already have internet. If you want streaming services like Prime, Netflix, or what have you, you don't have to have all of them. You can maybe just have one. If it's Netflix, you have one account, $9.99. So you can find ways to cut back on some of these expenses. If you are in debt, does not mean that you can't have a streaming account. You can. You really do need to be able to enjoy some of that money that you're working so hard for. So this is why I include streaming services in here. Then tithe and giving. I am a Christian and I believe in giving. This may be for you, this may not be for you, but it's all up to you. So if you decide that this is not for you, you can remove this, but we have allocated £50 from our £1,900 budget. So for total fixed expenses, we're saying of the 1,900, you spend 1,375. This again is just an example budget. This may be more, this may be less for you, depending on how you structure things in your life. Moving over to personal expenses, because it's very important that we have personal expenses, okay? So miscellaneous, again, every budget needs to have miscellaneous because there's always something that comes up. Always. So we're budgeting £50 for this. Okay. So my camera decided to be an enemy of progress. So it has died in the middle of me recording this video. So I'm going to continue on my mobile because I was on a roll there, and I actually don't want to start the video all over again because I feel like I've shared such good information in this video already. So I don't want to lose that. So we'll continue on my phone. And because I'm using my phone and when I'm editing, I kind of lose some of the niceness about using iMovie. So I'm going to disappear completely. So you just be hearing my voice as I continue to walk you through the tracker. So I'll resume my recording of my screen. I'll be looking down, but obviously you won't see that I'm constantly looking down because I'll just have the audio in the background and the tracker in front. So let's continue. So socialization is important. Just because you are in debt does not mean that you cannot have a life. You definitely need to have a life. So for the purpose of this budget, we're saying we're going to add £30. Clothing, again, this is debatable. You can wear all your clothes to death, but at some point you will need to get some new items. So we're including £50 in this budget. Gym membership, again, if you're looking for ways to save money, this is something that can go. You can either look for something that is cheaper, or you can scrap this completely and maybe just watch some free videos on YouTube. So, but for the purpose of this for this budget example, we're saying you'll be paying £40 towards your gym membership. Eating in and out, so this is, going to restaurants, takeaway, what have you. Again, this is something that you can get rid of completely or reduce, but for the purpose of this example, we are budgeting 25. For your personal expenses, we're saying of the money that you make, 1,900, you'll be spending 195 on yourself. Okay, again, when you are in debt and all you do is pay off debt, it becomes overwhelming. So it's very important that your budget looks for ways to actually give you a little bit of life, because after a while you get overwhelmed, you get tired, and then this is how people start slacking. They drop the ball, and then all of a sudden they're back in debt again, because there is absolutely nothing that is making them happy in their lives apart from paying off that debt. So this is why we're including personal expenses. But again, this is a personal choice. That's what personal money management is. It is personal. So let's move over to the debt section. So for the debt section, we have assumed that you've got 2 loans. We've assumed that we've got 2 credit cards. You've got 1 car loan. We're assuming that you have a student loan and 2 student loans. Now, if you notice in this tracker, we did not actually include car insurance, but if you have a car, I mean, you can have a car loan but don't have a car anymore, so it gets rid of some of those expenses. But if you still have a car, then you have to think about car insurance, unless you've paid for it annually already. But for this example, we're just gonna ignore car insurance completely. So starting off with the loan, for all of the types of loans that you have, because you've spoken to the companies that you owe, we're assuming you'll be paying each and every single one of the companies that you owe £50 each. So again, if your lowest loan, if you started with the Snowball method, credit card 2 is your lowest amount. So you'd start with that one because you owe £1,000 on that one. So that's what you would start with. But if the credit card 2 was also the highest interest rate, you would still start with that one if you follow the avalanche method. So for the purpose of this budget, we're saying 350 of your 1,900 is going towards paying off debt. Now, looking at some of the other expenses we've included in here, you can actually get rid of some stuff and increase your debt repayments to some of the debt that you have. So again, there's so many ways you can flip this. There's so many ways you can budget when you are in debt. Then savings. Now, this is again something that is debatable. I still believe that even when you're in debt, you should be able to at least save some money, put on the side specifically your emergency fund. You don't have to have sinking fund 1, 2, and 3, but your emergency fund, that one you need, because it is so important. If you are in debt and you don't have an emergency fund, the first thing you would do when you're in debt is look for ways you can borrow money again, making you go back into debt. If it's a credit card, for example, credit card 2, you've just paid credit card 2 off, which was you owe £2,000 on that, you paid it off, and then you haven't canceled the card, for example, and then you got an emergency, you will go back to the credit card. And then that means you go back into debt. So this is why it's very important to start looking at your budget and ensuring that you have an emergency fund, regardless of how much debt you are in. Find a way, even if it's £10, it doesn't have to be £50. It could be £10, it could be £3, whatever. Start looking at finding ways to add some money to an emergency fund. Build up a nice emergency fund. Dave Ramsey, the money guru from the US, says at least $1,000. For us, I would say £1,000. That, as much as I don't agree with a lot of things that he says, I do agree that you do need at least your first ever emergency fund to be at least £1,000, because when you're in debt, most of the time you can't even afford £100. This is why £1,000 is better to work towards and putting that amount of money in the emergency fund than not to have anything, not to work for something like, oh, I want to have £5,000 in my emergency fund. That's too big a goal. Start small, and £1,000 is small enough. You can say 500, but again, if you have a bigger emergency, 500 may not cover it, but 1,000 may be better. Okay, so that's what we're saying. We'll be putting at least 50 pounds. And then for the sinking funds, we say 10 pounds each. You've got 3 sinking funds, you're saving for 3 different things, so we're saying 10 pounds each, so which means you'll be putting 80 pounds towards your savings. Again, you can rejiggle this depending on your priorities in life. If you want to pay off debt and also save at the same time, like save more in your emergency fund, you can, definitely do some rejiggling within your budget. So now, like I said, we have a total expenditure section. So for fixed expenses, we're saying 1,375, personal expenses 195, debt expenses we're saying 350, savings we're saying 80 pounds. So that brings us to 2,000 pounds even. Now, we actually have an expected income of 2,200. So what this means is you can add this extra 200 pounds somewhere in your budget. So for you, it could be, how about we put 150 into the emergency, and maybe because we're targeting car loan, we're targeting credit card to pay that off, why don't we increase the monthly repayment for that month to 100 pounds, and that will bring you, we're increasing not to 100 pounds, we're increasing that to 150. Oops, we're increasing that to 150, and that will bring your balance to 2,200. So that is what you are working with, that is what you are expecting to receive, and that's how much you're expecting to spend. So this is how you can budget on a lower income. This is not perfect, but it's an example of how you can budget on a low income. Now, when you are in debt, a lot of things might seem impossible. Do not lose hope. I was in that situation. My notebook has actually, it wasn't just my financial book, it was also my diary. It was there were days in here where I wrote, oh God, please let my direct debit go through. Please God, let me not have the bank charge, because even the bank charge, because of the type of account that I had, again, I wasn't knowledgeable at that time, and I'm not that knowledgeable. I've just acquired enough knowledge at the moment to get me through my personal finance, but I'm still learning, I'm still reading finance books and what have you. But at that time I was praying, please let not me have another bank charge, because I've always used up all of my overdraft and all of that jazz. It was an extremely tough time. On the outside, nobody knew. And this is the thing, I mean, World Mental Health Day was a couple days ago, and I mean, it's nobody knew what I was going through internally, how I was struggling. I didn't even tell my parents because I was scared, because they would ask me things like, how did you get in debt? Like, why would you do that? And all of that and I honestly did not have the answer. I honestly did not. Sometimes I sit back and I'm like, how the heck did I get into debt? And I couldn't answer for a long time, but it was poor money management. It was not having the right discipline when it came to money. It was not respecting money. It was not realizing money is a tool. And it was also not realizing that there are certain things that I would want in life I wouldn't have money for, but if I worked hard and waited and saved, I could have it. I didn't have to have it there and then. Instant gratification wasn't the life, but that's what it felt like back then. So now I'm in a place where I'm in a good place. I am financially stable, if I could say that. And now I know if I take on any debt, I can only take it on if I know I can pay that off. So if I use my credit cards to spend on anything, best be ready that there is money in either my current account or in my savings account that I can use to pay that back off 100% if I needed to. So now I'm in a place where if I don't have it, I don't spend it. And even when I have the money, do I really need that item? Do I really need to go into debt for this item? So I ask all of these questions and I track my money meticulously. Sometimes People may say a little bit too much, but again, I enjoy budgeting. I enjoy watching my money grow. I enjoy saving. I enjoy spending my money as well. So, you know, when you've paid off debt, I mean, it won't instantly feel like, oh, yes, now we have all of that money. No, there will be certain areas in your life that you may have neglected because you were in debt and you're focusing on that. So they may have to feel that voice. If you were not saving because you were in debt, you may now have to shift your focus to that. So it will be 1 minute where you're celebrating, yay, I'm debt free. Then the next minute, like, okay, what other life priorities do I now need to focus on that I neglected all this time? So yeah, this video is super long. I appreciate you all if you've watched this far. So thank you so much. And I hope this video will be helpful to you. And I apologize in the quality of my recording because I've switched off to my iPhone. I know it's got really great video quality, but in any case, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.